What is up, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome into an all new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today, as always. And if you're here for the first time, thanks so much for checking it out. Make sure to make Pack a Day part of your daily routine. We are here 365 days a year, breaking down the Green Bay Packers, never stopping. It is an absolute joy of my life to be able to do this. So again, thanks so much for the support. Thanks for being here. We've got a lot to discuss today. We're going to be going over our primary topic, which is Chris Godwin, whether or not he would be a viable option as a free agent for Green Bay. Some really, really fun tape. I'm really excited to dive into it and kind of go over it with you guys, the pros, the cons, all of it. But before we get there, one, I want to thank Jim Mitchell for becoming a brand new member and Razul Douglas Time for becoming a brand new All-Pro member. Make sure to check out those memberships. And fellas, I appreciate that a ton. Sterling Sharpe is the big immediate news from a Packers standpoint, right? Brand new Hall of Famer, technically not inducted yet, but announced as the one of four players actually as a Hall of Fame class. Only four. So very interesting. Antonio Gates, Jared Allen, Eric Allen, and Sterling Sharpe. That's it. Only four individuals going in to the Hall of Fame this year, and Sterling Sharpe is one of those four. Incredibly, incredibly, incredibly well deserved. He was the total package. And if you haven't had the opportunity to go back and watch Sterling Sharpe and the highlights, I get it was a career shortened due to injury. Man, he was one in a pretty darn amazing golden age of wide receivers in the NFC. I mean, you had the big four, what I considered them in the NFC specifically: Jerry Rice, and then you had Chris Carter, Michael Irvin, and Sterling Sharpe, in no particular order other than Jerry Rice being number one. Just an unbelievable group of wide receivers. And you saw some other ones too, like Herman Moore. Like it was a great wide receiver. Obviously, Andre Reed in the AFC, amongst others. It was a great time to be a football fan. We started to see the explosion of these passing offenses and the Marinos and the Elways and all these incredible wide receivers. But you went out and you watched any given Sunday, and Sterling Sharpe was right there with Michael Irvin, Hall of Famer, Chris Carter, Hall of Famer, Jerry Rice, Hall of Famer. I mean, Rice was Rice. There was no denying that. He was arguably still the greatest of all time. Randy Moss certainly in that conversation as well. I think Jerry Rice, from beginning a career to end a career, is the greatest receiver of all time. Like in totality, I think peak Randy Moss was the best wide receiver in a moment. Like if you could just have one wide receiver on one play, peak Randy Moss, I think, was the best to do it. I think best career, no, unquestionably Jerry Rice. But even in prime Jerry Rice time, you went out there and you watched Sterling Sharpe, and it would be, you still wouldn't be like, oh, Jerry Rice is just way better. Like Sterling Sharpe was in that conversation, and he was the total package. I mean, you talk about strength, size, speed, route running. He had it all. And it sucks that his career was cut so short, but he was more than deserving of the Hall of Fame accolade. I thought one of the cool moments in Hall of Fame speech history was Shannon Sharpe when he went up there and is like, I'm a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and I'm not even the best football player in my family. Kind of gives me chills just thinking about it. Just what an unbelievable line. I mean, how cool. And by the way, I sent my friend this as well. Can you imagine, like, if I have two boys, Xavier and Elijah. I can't even fathom, right? I can't even fathom one of them getting a cup of coffee in the NFL or in a pro sports league, right? Just you know what? They made it to the level of they got picked up on a practice squad for a week, right? It would be absurd. It'd be absurd. Much less both of them getting picked up to a cup of coffee in the NFL or a pro sports league, soccer, baseball, whatever it might be, and both of them just getting a cup of coffee in that league. That would be absurd. Having both of them be good players in pro sports would be absurd, like beyond absurd. Imagine having two kids. And I don't know I think those are I don't know the Sharpe family well enough, I guess, to know if maybe there were more kids. I know that they were obviously brothers, and that I think they were the only two, but I guess I didn't look into it ahead of time. But assuming they're the only two, even if it's not, even if they had 40 other kids, like it doesn't change the fact having two kids that you had not only make it to the NFL, not only just make it for a cup of coffee, not only become Pro Bowl players, not only become all pro players, to be Hall of Famers. It is a crazy thing to think about. The first brothers in the Hall of Fame together in the NFL, So with Eli Manning not get elected, in with Peyton, they will be the first ever brothers to be in the Hall of Fame together. So that's really cool as well. Well deserved. The other one I talked about the Shannon Sharpe, but Deion Sanders, he was at the combine one year, and talking to Charles Davis and Daniel Jeremiah, and they asked him, who was the toughest receiver that you went against, and he went on about Sterling Sharpe. Didn't know how he was not in the Hall of Fame, and how Deion described it. Obviously, paraphrasing here a bit, was like, he's like, you get up at the line of scrimmage and you try to press him. He's going to rip your face mask off and rip your pads off, and he's going to run right through you, and you can't do anything about it. And then he's like, so you back up, and then he catches something short, and you can't tackle the guy because he's just going to run right through you as well. He's like, there's no answer to it. And then of course he, great route runner, height, weight, speed, just all of it. Just a phenomenal football player, and super well deserved. Now on the flip side, unfortunately, Mike Holmgren did not get the votes to get in. I know Wes Hodkiewicz, kind of tweeted about this. I do think there's some tweaks to be made with the, the group of ones that are sort of, I forget the terminology of it off the top of my head, but like the extended ones, the ones that are kind of getting their last chance on it. Those are the ones I think they might need to change the criteria up a bit, because getting the 80% is a really, really difficult thing to do. I don't know if it's the alumni, I forget what it is, but those ones, I think you have to change the criteria a little bit. I think 80% is tough. I don't hate, by the way, that it's a 4-player class. Like if that's all there were, I'm fine with it. And I do think sometimes that adds a little bit more value of when you do get in, or when a first team Hall of Famer gets in. I think it adds a little bit more to that. I'll also add to this, I don't really care in any of it at all. Like I'm not a huge like, oh, this guy's got to get in the Hall of Fame or this guy doesn't. I'm happy for Sterling. No question about it. Jerry Kramer was the big one. Really wanted to see him get in. But for the most part, I'm pretty indifferent, to who gets in, who doesn't get in. There was one person in this class. I thought Luke Kuechly should have been a easy entry into the Hall of Fame. Him not getting in seemed very odd and weird, but I digress. That's all kind of my thoughts. Again, bummer that Mike Holmgren didn't get in. Certainly deserving to be there. What he did, not only is his time as a head coach, but offensive coordinator in San Francisco, then head coach in Green Bay, and then really kind of turning Seattle around, having the GM duties there as well. I thought overall, unbelievable career. Yes, just the one Super Bowl win, but I thought he was very instrumental in kind of, with Ron Wolf, Bob Harlan, really turning this franchise around into, from a laughing stock into a Super Bowl contender. A lot of pieces had to go into that. Favre, Reggie White, some really talented players. Ron Wolf, again, Bob Harlan as well. But Mike Holmgren had a huge say in that. I think he's deserving. If you had to ask me which one should have gotten in, definitely would have said Sterling Sharpe a little bit more than Holmgren, but would have been nice to see Mike get in as well. With Sterling Sharpe getting in, though, it does theoretically open the possibility of the Packers being in the Hall of Fame game, getting that extra preseason game. For better or worse, don't know which it would be, but that is a possibility. And you would think that there's 4 players, right? Gates, Allen, Jared Allen, Eric Allen, and Sterling Sharpe. So Chargers, Vikings, Eagles, and Packers. My thought process here is they're not going to do Packers Vikings. They're not going to do a NFC North rivalry in the Hall of Fame game. So that one's out. I wonder if they're, after the Eagles are in the Super Bowl and everything, maybe there's a added advantage to having them Philly in the Hall of Fame game. I'm almost wondering if they go in a different direction and say, all right, they were just in the Super Bowl, we're going to do different teams for the Hall of Fame game. If that's true, you also have the Chargers and the Vikings apparently, who I guess play next year. At least somebody had said that next year. I can see if I can pull that up really quick to see if that's actually true. Vikings opponents for 2025. They do play the Chargers. All right, so they do play the Chargers. So maybe you don't want that to be the game, and that would kind of leave you, with Chargers Packers as the potential matchup in the Hall of Fame game. Now, again, maybe the Eagles are more involved in that. Who knows? They could theoretically do it with any team. It doesn't have to be a team with a Hall of Fame member, but usually it is. I think there's actually a pretty decent chance here that Green Bay gets in that Hall of Fame game. We'll see. Just something to kind of remember, keep an eye on as time goes on. But I don't think it's impossible that with Sterling Sharpe getting in. If Holmgren would have got in too, would have almost been a no-brainer, right? But even with Sharpe getting in, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Green Bay gets in that Hall of Fame game. We'll see. Speaking of the awards, I'll just go through these quickly. Josh Allen MVP. I would have went Lamar, but I don't actually have as much of an issue with Josh Allen, but I would have went Lamar. Saquon Barkley, Offensive Player of the Year. Patrick Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year. Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie. Jared Verse, Defensive Rookie. Joe Burrow, Comeback Player. Kevin O'Connell, Coach. Ben Johnson, Assistant Coach. And Eric Armstead was the Walter Payton Award winner, with Antonio Gates, Jared Allen, Eric Allen, and Sterling Sharpe again getting the Hall of Fame nods. Meanwhile, a couple other just really quick things. Jordan Love was on Radio Row. People try to get him to bite in the number one wide receiver. Do you need one? And Jordan Love, a little bit more PR approach to it, handled it really well. Loves his guys. Did say at the end, his overall philosophy, is if you have a good group and you add a really good player to it, it's just going to be a better group. It's a phenomenal way of saying that. Fantastic A+ PR answer, Jordan Love. Well done. It's what the face of the franchise has to do. You nailed it. You crushed it out of the park. You knew the answers to the test ahead of time. You knew exactly what was going to come, but you handled it perfectly. Got asked it in a couple different ways and a couple different times, and handled it perfectly. So that was Jordan's response. I thought it was good. No real takeaways there. And then last but not least, Matt Schneidman posted this. It was something I was thinking about as well, and I think he's 100% spot on. When you heard number one, Keyshawn Nixon, say that he's going to be the number one corner next year and wants to focus on corner, so he doesn't want to return kicks because of that. Interesting note. And then when you hear that Josh Jacobs say that, hey, we're going to need a corner this year, it would seem to indicate, if we're going to do some tea leaf reading here, that everyone again kind of knows that Jair is not going to be back. If Jair's back, you're probably not thinking corner quite as much. It's probably not the one that really pops to mind, at least not as much. And if Keyshawn, knows that Jair's coming back, maybe he's not saying, corner one quite as easily. Maybe not. Who knows? But that's the tea leaves that are out there. And I think, again, you just read everything. You look at all the beat guys who are super well connected. They're all expecting it. As somebody who watches it closely, looks at the salary cap, again, these are not hard tea leaves to read, right? And I'll say it one more time. I don't think it's an impossibility that Jair could be back. But I think everything points in that direction, from previous suspensions to Matt LaFleur's being frustrated to Jair not wanting to talk to the media at the end, saying he'd have nothing good to say. You can just tell, right? Keyshawn saying he wants to be corner one, Josh Jacobs saying there needs to be a new corner into, like, these are not small little, crumbs that we're having to get the magnifying glass out and follow to a T, right? These are pretty sizable, noteworthy details that we can put together and say, all right, Jair's not going to be back. And I still believe that to be the case as well. I would be pretty surprised. Like I said, not follow to my chair stunned if he's back, but I'd be pretty darn surprised. And I just can't see a world in which that happens at this point in time. All right, let's get to our main topic for today. Chris Godwin, and more specifically, would he be a fit in Green Bay? This is another one that was really fun to watch. I'm really loving this. I'm really loving doing it, getting to see these veteran players that you see obviously the highlights of, and when you're breaking down a Packers-Bucks game, you get to watch them a little bit more closely from time to time, but really getting to see these players in the minutia and how they go about winning. It's been a really fun process, and I'm hoping to do more of it moving forward. But let's start with the clear and obvious here with Chris Godwin. He obliterated his ankle. He shattered it in week 7 against the Ravens. Now, initially, there was some hope and thought that maybe he could get back by the end of the playoffs. By the end of the playoff, or by playoff time, that was never going to be the case. He was not anywhere near coming back. The thought process, though, of even if there was a thought process of that he could be back, is that he probably should be back ready to go for the start of the season. But it was a brutal ankle injury. And like I said, basically just shattered it. That's not ideal, right? Especially as you're going into free agency. And let me just say too, completely feel for Chris Godwin. This is the second time where he's gone into free agency with a major injury. This time he shattered his ankle. Is the last time he got a shot at free agency. He came off a torn ACL and MCL. 6'1", 208 pounds, 9.66 relative athletic score coming out of college with a 4.42 40. But the big thing here, again, coming off the shattered ankle, plus has previous ACL and MCL injuries as well back in 2021. Now, I will say when he came back from the ACL and MCL injuries, had over 1,000 yards that next season. He's shown the ability to bounce back. This thankfully was not another ACL or MCL. It was not a, torn Achilles or something like that. It's a bad ankle injury, but you should be able to recover from it, from a broken ankle. Should be able to get that back going. But those are scary injuries. And now he's at ACL, MCL, obliterated ankle, and these things start to add up a little bit. And the other thing, he'll turn 29 this month in February. So we're not talking about a 25-year-old here that's bouncing back from injury. We're talking about a 29-year-old. It's a little bit different. So that's the big elephant in the room here. The injury issues, turning 29. And the next one is, what type of contract are you looking at giving a Chris Godwin? If you're thinking off the top of your head, like, yeah, he's had some injuries, but for 1 year, 10 million, I would go and get him still. Like, I'll bring him in. I'll take the chance with that. Sure. Except he's projected to get 3 years, 60 million. That changes the calculus a little bit, right? He's PFF's fourth highest rated free agent, even despite the injuries. Fourth on their list. 3 years, 60 million, 20 mil per year, 40 million guaranteed is their projection. You don't like theirs? Well, Spotrac actually thinks it's more. 3 years, 67.5 million, 22.5 million per year. That's Spotrac's assessment of him. I think 3 years, 60 sounds about right. I think that's right around what he's going to get. 3 years, 60 million. Maybe 3 years, 58, give or take a little. I don't know if he gets full 40 guaranteed. I think that's going to be closer to like 30, 35. But somewhere in that range is what Chris Godwin's likely to get this upcoming offseason. So not only is he 29, not only is he coming off a major injury, not only has he had major injuries in the past with the ACL and the MCL, but you're about to pay him a ton of money. Well, there's a reason for that. Tape was freaking awesome. And statistically, at least prior to the injury, he was looking pretty damn good. He played in 7 games prior to the injury, 62 targets, 50 catches, 576 yards, 11.5 yards per catch, 5 touchdowns, 33 first downs, 1 fumble, no drops. He was leading the league in catches and tied for the league lead in touchdowns when he went out with the injury. He was balling. He looked fantastic. So again, I feel for him that he had this injury. It has affected what he's going to get on the open market. Probably would have been closer to 25, 28 million-ish, I think, had he not had the injury. The injury probably brings him down closer to 18, 19, 20 million. So it's a big difference. He was playing awesome. Like I said, led the league in catches, tied for the league lead in touchdowns when he went down with the injury. His previous 3 seasons, 84 catches, 840 yards, 7 touchdowns, 98 catches, 1,103 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 104 catches, 1,023 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, one note here is if you look at his last 4 years combined, I've been, injury this past year or whatever, but 4 seasons, 15 touchdowns, averaging less than 4 touchdowns per season. Again, some of the injuries plays into that as well, clearly, but has not been a huge touchdown merchant, if you will, these past 4 seasons. One thing I'll add on top of this, his stat line is peak Chris Godwin. This is who he is to a T. 50 catches on 62 targets, catches everything his way. 576 yards on 50 catches, 11.5 yards per catch. That's Chris Godwin. He's not the 16, 17, 18 yards per catch guy. He's going to work a lot of the intermediate short stuff, go over the middle of the field. That's the type of receiver he is. 5 touchdowns, 33 first downs, definitely something that is very Chris Godwin, picking up those big first downs, and then 0 drops. This is like that's Chris Godwin in a nutshell. It's exactly who he is. Passer rating when targeted. This past year, he had the Buccaneers quarterbacks had 127.5 passer rating when they targeted Chris Godwin. Was down a little bit the year before at 90.6, and then every other year, 100.1, 110.5, 120.2, 121.7, 112.4, save for his rookie season where it was 85.9. That's a long time ago. In his career, when quarterbacks have targeted Chris Godwin, their passer rating has been 108.6. That's pretty good. His PFF grades, this year an 86.3 prior to the injury. The rest of them going backwards, from current to previous. 77.5, 75.7, 81.3, 76.0, 90.7, 80.4, 81.9. So a picture of consistency. That's who you get with Chris Godwin. The positives, can play inside or outside. You can put him in the slot, you can put him outside, he can win either way. Here's the big one. We'll get to the chase right away. Precision, rhythm, and timing. Precision, rhythm, and timing. If you caught what Josh Jacobs said the other day, we need a veteran wider. He didn't say veteran. What did he say? Established, basically, I'm paraphrasing a bit there, but established number one wide receiver is what he was looking at. And proven was the word he used, proven number one wide receiver. And then he talked about consistency. So somebody that we know is going to be a little bit more consistent. What I believe, and Mike Wall posted something similar as well, is it's the attention to detail, the route running, the consistency with which these wide receivers are playing with. Chris Godwin is a picture of that consistency, precision, rhythm, and timing. You throw him a ball, you can anticipate it because you know exactly where he's going to be. You know when he's going to break the route off. You know at what depth it's going to be broken off at. He is precise with everything that he does. And Baker Mayfield trusted it. He ripped it into windows, and Chris Godwin paid it off. He is really fun to watch in that regard. Just all the little nuances of playing that wide receiver position, knowing exactly when to snap a route off, knowing exactly the depth, the distance, the target depth, all of it is going to be something that stands out when you watch Chris Godwin. And then you add on top of it that he's got unbelievable hands, just plucks the ball out of the air. He has a fewer than 6% drop rate on catchable passes in 7 of his 8 seasons. That's the type of dude he is. Does not drop many balls that come his way. Had 0 drops last season prior to the injury. The other one that I think Green Bay's wide receivers at times do not do a great job with is the scramble drill. That's another thing that Godwin's great at. Coming back to the ball, finding opportunities, staying alive, giving his quarterback a target. Fantastic at it. Really, really fantastic at it. And I'll add on top of that one more thing. Like I said it, but I want to also put in a different category. Just in general, his ability to come back to the ball is phenomenal. Like if they're even with the linebacker on a crossing route or wherever it might be, he does a great job of angling it back, plucking the ball out of the air, and then getting upfield. Really nice job of it. Body control is great. Yards after contact is good. He has a low center of gravity, so people bounce off of him from time to time. It's not the fastest guy in the world. They give him a lot of wide receiver screens. Pretty good agility. Again, good center of gravity, low center of gravity. People bounce off of him, breaks tackles, and then gets up to speed from there. Does a really nice job with it. Can hit him with fades, back shoulder fades. Beautiful. Oh, here's the big one. Love this one. There is a beautiful simplicity to his game. And what I mean by that is there's the wide receivers that are doing the 17 choppy steps and then breaking off the route, or they're, juking people at the catch point, like whatever it might be. And I'm not saying one way is better or worse than the other, but the way that Godwin wins is just smooth release off the line of scrimmage, knows exactly where he's going with his route, knows exactly how to sell it, and then snaps it off at the exact right time and gets the separation that way. It's not acres of separation, but it's just a nice, clean, easy route with precision. You know exactly where it's going to be. You know exactly when to throw the ball. And there's just this beautiful simplicity to it. It's never trying to do too much. It's just going out and running the route that's out there for you and doing it with perfect rhythm and timing. I loved watching it. Absolutely loved it. It's a really, really fun football player. He's a gamer. He's a winner. Gives solid effort as a blocker. And again, is Mr. Consistency as a wide receiver. A ton to like about his tape. A ton to like overall about his game. The negatives, the touchdown production's a little bit underwhelming. He's not a dynamic playmaker. If you're looking for somebody to come and stretch the field, be that deep threat, open up things underneath for other wide receivers, that's just not Chris Godwin. That's not who he is. He's going to be the guy that benefits from other players stretching the field and being that guy that can win over the middle, short and intermediate, and from time to time with some of those deeper passes. But he lives kind of 20 yards and in. That's where he does all of his damage. So not this huge dynamic playmaker. He can run after the catch, again, bounce off of tackles, but I don't think he still has that 4.40 speed. Doesn't feel like it. If it is, it takes him a little bit to get up to it. I'll say it that much. Injuries, of course. Torn ACL, torn MCL in 2021, coming off a completely blown up ankle is not ideal. Not ideal to say the least. 29 years old, big contract, not a true deep threat. That's the little stuff that you have to put in the negative category, that there's not a ton of them, but it's important stuff. If you are going to give $20 million a year, you have to remember they're 29 years old in February, end of February. They're not super dynamic. and not huge touchdown production, and the injuries have been a major issue. It's a lot of money to invest in somebody that has those couple red flags next to their name. The case for the first thing I'll say is every single Packers wide receiver should watch Chris Godwin. He would be a phenomenal mentor for the younger wide receivers. Even if he's not a Packer, like force all of them to watch some Chris Godwin. They could be good for him. Again, the rhythm, timing, precision, coming back to the football, scramble drill, all things that Green Bay's receivers can do a better job of. And Chris Godwin has it in spades. He's got all of those boxes checked to a very high degree. And I think Jordan Love would find him as his favorite target incredibly fast. I think being able to trust exactly where he's going to be at all times and being able to anticipate those throws and rip them, I think he would be a young quarterback's best friend. I really do. The case against injuries, age, money, playmaking. That's it. If the injury didn't happen, or if maybe he was a little bit more of a downfield playmaker, you're talking somebody that's easily the number one wide receiver on the market. I think ahead of T. Higgins, but it's not that way. He's not the most dynamic dude, and he's coming off all those injuries, and he's going to turn 29. That definitely changes the calculus a bit. My verdict is injury issues at age 29 for a non-dynamic wide receiver at 20 mil per year over 3 years is a pretty hard pass. And it sucks. It sucks because I really, really liked what he showed on tape. And I think that type of wide receiver would do wonders for Jordan. And I don't think it's maybe entirely impossible, but I don't think it's super likely. I don't think that's the way that Goody's probably going to go with throwing money at a 29-year-old oft-injured wide receiver, at least maybe not oft-injured. That's probably the wrong word, but significant injuries to him. I don't think that's the direction that he's going to want to go in. In the ultimate what-if scenario, if he did become a Green Bay Packer, I love the player. Like I said, I think he would become Jordan's go-to target very fast. And you hope that he just maintains his game, that the ankle and everything heals the way that it's supposed to. And you get a great wide receiver that fits in the offense and Jordan's going to fall in love with. Wouldn't hate it by any means. Just don't necessarily expect it. Really, really fun tape. Really fun player. Feel awful that he got hurt because he was absolutely crushing it this past year. And if some team gets that version of Chris Godwin, he comes in and just is like Chris Godwin again, they're going to get a big time impact free agent in free agency. He's very, very talented, and he's going to help any team in the NFL. He could play for all 32. No question about it. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate you guys a ton. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Arnoldo Espinoza, Peter Ataka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Step Keith, Dylan Pat Scott, Bobby Santoro, SoCal Pat, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, and Razul Douglas time. I'll see you guys soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.